Hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of In the Spotlight. I'm Mike Kenichi, and I'm really excited tonight because I have two gentlemen who, if you followed TV, especially in the 90s, you saw them in a bunch of things. And of course, they've kind of returned to the acting gig, after being away from it for many years. They got a great project they're both doing together that they're going to discuss. It is my privilege to introduce to you Mr. Stuart Fratkin and Mr. Rich Grosso. And guys, I want to thank you for coming on today. It's a real thrill for me.
It's my pleasure. Nice to
Thanks
see
for
you,
having
Mike.
us.
Right. So, Stuart, I wanted to ask you this. A lot of times people are always associated with that one role that they do, even if they've done a million things. And it's always been ski school for you. It came out, I want to say 89 or 1990, and yourself and Dean Cameron did a tremendous job. And, I really enjoyed the movie. And, every time I watch it, I think to myself, God, I know it was probably done by stunt people. But when I see those skis way up in the air like that, it just, I get that feeling in my body. But talk about like, are you? I'm sure you're proud of that movie, but are you okay with if that's what people identify you as?
Interestingly enough, that probably is, yes, I would say that's that and Teen Wolf 2, I would
Yeah.
say are tied for what most people remember me by. But also, oddly enough, it's also like things like the generation of my daughter knows me from Friends
Yeah.
and That's So Raven as well. But no, it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, I'm old enough to know that when you have a body of work and people remember it and it sparks something in them years later, to me it's a compliment. And so not at all. And just so you know, all that skiing that you
That was
mentioned,
me. I did it all. That was
it was all done by stunt people. Obviously, it was weird because when we saw the final cut of the movie, there was so much that was done in post that Dean and I were like, "Damn, they made this actually a ski movie that had this um, an a la carte menu of tits and ass."
And interestingly enough, Stuart, is I think Dean has talked about it before that a lot of it didn't make sense to him, but it was still a good movie, even though it didn't really make a lot of sense. But I think sometimes those are the best movies, especially when they're comedies and stuff like that. When just throughout the movie, it's just like, you're laughing no matter what the situation is. And I felt like that's what the movie did, because sometimes, don't get me wrong, dramas are great to watch, but there's always going to be sadness in them sometimes or anger. And in this movie, there's nothing but laughter.
Yeah, there was a very loose plot when I got the original script. So the story kind of goes that I got this script, and there was this very thin plot of similar to Animal House. You had the deltas, and then you had the Delta house, and then you had the rival house. It was very similar to that, and that's kind of the basis of it. And then, of course, the who would rule the mountain at the end. That was kind of the loose plot. Now, when I originally read for it, I read for the part that Dean played, and at the time his name was Dave Marshall. So I read that part, and then they offered it to Dean, and then they asked me to play this other role of Fitz, which didn't really have anything in it. There was nothing that was concrete about the character. So I worked with the writers, and then accepted the role, and then went to Vancouver, and we shot it in Whistler, British Columbia. And during the shoot, the writers came to me and Dean and I, and Pat Laberto, and asked us to write some additional scenes that are all. So we wrote the scenes that night, gave them to the producer, and the next day they were all in the movie. They were all ready to. They were scripted and they were ready to go. So a lot of that shit that's in there all came from, you know, the um, Birth of the Lambada, Godzilla, this weird subplot of subconsciously telling Johnny how to ski. All that stuff was all made up on the fly between the three of us. Whose underwear is this? Helium theater, all that stuff was all done by us. It was not in the original script. But yeah, to go back to your original question, I mean, it has no like actual through line other than what, you know, that basic plot was. But I would agree with you that some of the best comedies out there, it really just almost like skits put together, like, you know, small little sketches put together into a movie.
Yeah, and it was really I always enjoyed it, and I still love watching it to this day. And Rich, for a guy that was doing acting, I mean, the '90s was a great time for TV because a lot of the movies, like Ski School and stuff, they really like were doing movies in a different way in the '90s, which I thought was a lot better as well. And what I really enjoyed about it, like I said, is if it was a comedy, they kind of kept it as a comedy. If it was drama, they kept it as drama with occasional stuff. But really, you could, differ, differentiate between which
Yeah.
one is which. And how
Yeah.
did I mean? Do you feel like you came into the acting scene right at the right time? Because I think the '90s was a great.
Well, if I were Stuart Fratkin, I came in at the right time. But for me, I had a little bit of a different journey for that. I was struggling at that time. I was a 30-something-year-old guy with a brand new baby, married with a brand new baby, and I looked like I was 11. Like I was this total guy that you see now who plays a lot of mobsters, but I looked like, you know, if Pee Wee Herman was James Gandolfini, you know. So so I remember the year Sopranos came out. It was like I looked old enough to be Tony Soprano's son, and in essence, the late great James Gandolfini, I was older than him in real life. So I worked sporadically, always had a side job. Uh, Always had a side job. Didn't have like quite the success to the point where it kind of just choked me out. Where I had to just get out of the business. But the silver lining for that for me was even before it was popular to do so, because I wasn't working in mainstream film or television, I was creating my own content before a lot of other people were. You know,
Yeah,
I wrote my own. I wrote a pilot with this very famous comedian, Six Tonight Show's named Steve Middleman. We wrote a pilot, and I was the guy that says, you know what, we should shoot this, and we did. We shot our own pilot. When nobody was really doing that. So people were pitching scripts. We were handing video cassette tapes. Go look what we did. And then after that, my inspiration was the movie Clerks, where they did this movie for $30,000. It won Sundance. I said, well, I could do that. So we charged up our credit cards and made a $30,000 movie called Nine Ball, which actually got on an alternate list for Sundance, but never got in. Which, interestingly enough, we didn't have the $250,000 to finish it. So it sat in my closet for 30 years. Over COVID, with film technology changing, we finished the movie 30 years later, and it just came out. It's streaming all over the place now. It's on, and it's called Nine Ball. And I went and behind the scenes and did like well over 300 commercials. So that's where I kind of got. So my lack of acting jobs in the '90s, even though there were a few here and there, made me a filmmaker. It taught me how to make movies, and more importantly, taught me how to make movies where I didn't have enough money to make movies. So that was kind of my silver lining.
right, right. And Stuart, I was thinking about a show I saw you on at least two or three episodes, and I'm a big fan of the show. It was NYPD Blue. I think you were on at least two. Just talk about that experience because that was a popular show. And one thing about Stephen Boschko and Dave Milch and those guys, whether you were a series regular or a guest star, they always gave everyone a great episode. I mean, great writing. So talk about that a little bit.
So I did a bunch of Botchko shows. I was very lucky to have been in the stable of actors that the casting directors, Junie Laurie Johnson, and her team brought in. So I did a bunch of Botchko shows, and that, man, they were always first class. They were always the one of some of the best guest stars uh, opportunities that I had in my career. So the original NYPD Blue. So I will tell you a quick story too. In addition to that, so the original NY. So I did two episodes. They were completely different characters. The
Yeah.
first one was an attorney, and so that scene was with Dennis Franz.
Yeah.
And then years later, I did another one that I played. What did I play in that one? Oh, that one was, I think, another attorney whose partner got killed. And that one was with Dennis Franz again. And then I forget who was the actor who took over the role for Rick Schroeder after.
Oh, Mark Paul Gosselaar. Yeah.
Yes. So the
Yeah.
scene was with him. So another Botchko show that I did, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but they did a pilot called NYPD 2069,
Yes, I heard about that. Yeah.
and it took place in the future.
Wow.
And so I shot a role in that pilot. It was never picked up, but I did a bunch of other handful of other Botchko shows as well. Murder One,
Yeah.
I did Murder One, and then
Doogie, I'm not mistaken, correct? Weren't you on that for an episode?
which one?
Doogie Howser. Weren't you on an episode of that? I
I
remember.
was on Doogie
Yeah.
Howser as well. Yes, I was on Doogie Howser, and then I was also on Philly.
Yes. Yeah.
I was on an episode of Philly too. Yeah, I did a lot of those shows. When I was transitioning from playing the goofy best friend of the lead onto adult roles, where I played a lot of attorneys, usually looking like this. So the role on Philly was very specific. He was an arrogant, spiky haired lawyer attorney who that's actually, that scene is one of my favorite scenes of all the Botchko roles that I've done, working with that team that on that episode of Philly. But yeah, yeah, it's sad that he is no longer with us. Stephen Botchko, great guy, good dude, great producer, obviously left behind a body of work that will be around forever.
Yeah. And if you think about this too, Stuart, it's a credit to him and his crew because you talked about Rick Schroeder. They went through so many character or actors who left the main role with Dennis Franz's character as his partner, and they still never missed a beat. I mean, they still were able to
It's true.
adjust to it. So, I mean, it's a credit to him and his staff because the show always was so good that it didn't matter who it was.
Who was the original actor on NYPD Blue?
David Caruso. Yeah.
David
Caruso.
Caruso.
Yeah.
Yes, left the show after 1 year,
Yeah.
correct?
And then Jimmy Smits came on. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, so that's one of those. I mean, listen, it all comes down to the writing. I mean, I would think it all comes down to how tight the writing is and how engaged the audience is with the characters that are created. And that's the reason why I came back. It's odd to me that when I came back and I read for another episode of NYPD Blue, I was like, "Do you not think the audience will know that I've been in another episode?" They were like, "No, it was so long ago that they doubted that the audience would put together the two characters or the actor had played, had come back." I also look different too, but I did an episode of another one of those incestuous shows. I did an episode of Baywatch
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
many, many years ago. And then they did a spin off called Baywatch Nights.
Yeah.
And so I was on an episode of that as well as another one of those weird incestuous things where an actor comes back to play a different role on, what would be the same world, right? The Baywatch world, but I played two different characters on those two shows.
Well, interestingly enough, too, Stuart, though, you talked about would the audience recognize you, but Curry Graham, who was on the final season of NYPD Blue, he became the new lieutenant. He played a character in previous seasons where, like, he was kind of like a bad guy, he had gotten arrested. And I'll tell you right now, they are right when they say that they won't recognize you because they always make sure you look different than what you played. Because when you watch that episode of Curry Graham a few seasons prior, he's got long hair and it doesn't even look like him unless the only reason you know is if you check the credits. So, I mean, they were always just Bosco to me. He gets a lot of credit and he deserves all the credit he gets because really he's a big reason why cop dramas were so good, in the 80s and 90s.
Of course, right. Of course, every single of one of those episodics around that time in the early 90s to mid 90s to late 90s were attributed to him. I think he only had one show that wasn't a success, and that was probably way before its time, called Cop Rock.
Yes, yeah.
I
Yeah.
love pop rock though, man, because I started in musical theater. That was the first job I ever had as an actor. So I loved cop rock.
Yeah, there was an
I
audience
was
for
very
that.
disappointed when that didn't succeed.
Yeah.
They, I've listened to a bunch. I listen to. I'm a big fan of podcasts, and they talk about that, about the fact that that show was way before its time. That it probably would have been successful around the time that that musicals became more popular on television. Um, from the time. What's the name of the show that had the musical? It's probably one of the most successful musical shows on television.
Glee.
Thank
Glee.
you,
Yeah, yeah.
Glee. Yes.
So Stuart, another again, Ski School was very popular, and then everybody knows how popular the Teen Wolf movies were, and you got to be. I think you were in Teen Wolf too. So I mean, just talk about that as well, because again, you came at a time too where these are like cult classics, as I like to call them, because to this day, especially these Comic Cons that people go to and these events and stuff, you could see all this like you'd be amazed at the type of action figures people bring with them, the comics and the DVDs and stuff like that. And that was another cult classic. So just talk about that a little bit.
I think I mean, in my time, I mean, I'm 60 years old, so when I was growing up, there were movies that became, I would say, cult classics as well. Rocky Horror Picture Show, one of my favorite movies of all time when I was a kid, was Phantom of the Paradise, which, had its ebb and flow as well. So, when you're making these movies, you never think that they're going to be, that they're going to be what they are, 30 years later.
Yeah.
But it is a testament to what the time that we live in today, and that is the accessibility of content wherever you are, whenever you'd like to access it. I think, for, speaking for Ski School, we just wanted to make a movie that was funny. I mean, that was really, what we were only interested in what was funny to us. As for Teen Wolf 2, that already had a built-in audience, right? So Michael J. Fox created this potential franchise that he now doesn't want to be a part of at all. But it is part of his lineage as far as being an actor. They then created this, which I thought was at the time was a brilliant segue from one TV star to another TV star when they wrote Teen Wolf 2. And this is so my involvement in it is supposedly because the actor who played Styles was not asked to be in the second one.
Yeah.
So there's a little known piece of trivia that I have talked about, and I'll continue to talk about it, that the original script of Teen Wolf or Teen Wolf 2 referred to the Styles character as a cousin of the other one, of the first one. That's how it was referred to in the original script. So when I got it, my assumption, I hadn't seen the original Teen Wolf at that time, but my assumption was this was a completely different character. So that's how I approached it. As far as the rest of the cast, Mark Holton came back.
Yeah.
James Hampton came back, the great James Hampton. I know they replaced the coach as well.
Yeah.
Paul Sand played it in the one I did, and then who was the first one? Do you remember who the first one was? The first coach?
I mean,
Jay Tarsis.
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
The great Jay Tarsis was the first one. So, it's a conversation I've had a lot in the past about why it's become popular again. And it's just one of those cyclical things, Mike. I think that just like with anything, as I referred to, that I have my batch of Caddyshack. I loved Caddyshack. Night Shift was one of my favorite movies. Fast Times. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
these were my movies that belonged to me when I was growing up. And so they also had a comeback as well. So that's kind of how I see, why the fascination with the 80s, early 90s is now hitting its stride, or has hit its stride in the past 5 years or so.
Right. And Rich, I think about this. Critics, they have to, give you positives and negatives about films, but a lot of times they give negatives all the time. And so many movies I've watched over the years that I thought were great, they would give it 1 star or 1.5 stars and say, they're missing the boat on this and stuff like that. But ironically, any of the movies they seem to give negative reviews about, these movies are still played somewhere 30 years later and still popular. So to me, if I'm an actor like you and Stuart, and you've done a movie or whatever, I would never even put a lot of stock into what a critic says. I would look at what the audience says, and if the audience is still watching it to this day, that's all that really matters.
Sure. At the end of the day, it's all art, right? One person's gold is another person's garbage. So why listen to just one individual that you might not share an opinion with? It just So yeah, you're right. I always listen to the overall audience, and even that I don't even listen to. I try to give everything a shot. There's stuff that have gotten critical acclaim, and I'm looking at it, scratching my head, going, "I want my hour and a half of life back." And these things are winning awards, or vice versa, So people are screaming they want their hour and a half life back, and I said, I'll watch this movie 10 times in a row. I love it. So maybe that just makes me a little weird. I don't know.
A perfect example of that is that. So I met Rich Rich had a restaurant around the corner from where I live. And so a mutual friends took us to this restaurant that Rich had called Giovanni. And one of his waiters introduced us to each other and said, I wanted to introduce the both of you because you were both in the remake of Godzilla, the one with Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
And so we talked and we became friends and pals. But that movie is a perfect example for me personally, because
and me too. It got panned. Yeah.
It got panned. It was not, I don't know if you went, Rich, but the cast and crew screening, it wasn't the premiere, but it was
Cinerama Dome.
At the Cinerama Dome.
I was there. Yeah.
Exactly. And I remember sitting and watching it with my wife and thinking, this isn't that good. This is not that good. I mean, when my part came, I was thrilled to be in it. to have made the final cut. The whole, everything
Yeah.
we shot was in there, and I was
Yeah.
thrilled to be in it. But overall, when it was finished, I was like, "This isn't that good.
Yeah.
It's not that good." But it ran and ran and ran
And
and
still
ran.
runs. And
It
still runs.
had a life that was unexplicable to me. Why it up until the latest franchise of Godzilla's came out, it was like the definitive Godzilla, even better than the ones I grew up with, which I was a huge fan of. Godzilla, I was like, oh my god, I was a huge Godzilla fan growing up. The
Me too.
original,
Me
and
too.
then the subsequent sequels with Monster Zero, Ghidorah. I was
King Kong
Rodan.
versus Godzilla.
Yeah, I was a huge fan. But this, like I said, sometimes there's no accounting for taste. Like, as Rich mentioned, one's man garbage is another man's gold.
Yeah. And the thing is, too, you just brought up Godzilla, but correct me if I'm wrong. Neither one of you realized that the other was in that movie,
No,
and
it's so
you didn't even know each other yet, correct?
no.
Correct.
I just found out now we were both at the Cinerama Dome that night. I didn't know. Well, what
Yep.
happened? I mean, I don't know why Stuart eventually left the business, but mine was I just wasn't getting enough work and I couldn't feed my family, but I knew how to cook. So I opened up a restaurant. And that's what I did for a better part of 15 years. And I didn't get back in the show business until the restaurant had took its course and I was done with it and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. And a friend of mine said, you used to be a pretty good actor back in the day. You ever think about doing that again? And I was like, I don't know, bro. That business kind of rode me hard and put me away wet the first time. And he goes, dude, you're old and fat now. You'll work, man. And he's like, and he was right. I mean, I have literally, and I don't say this egotistically. I say this with thanks and gratitude. I have more IMDb credits from 2013 to current on like big show, not huge parts, but big shows than I ever had in the 90s.
His Q meter is among the highest of the old and fat actors that are out there today.
Yeah. You want an old and fat guy? I'm your guy.
So, either one of you, we'll start with Rich, but I know you both have collaborated on a new project that you worked on, and something that I think started out where you didn't really know where it was going to go, if you two were going to be able to make it work, but it's something that is done, and now it's just a matter of when it gets shown. So Rich,
Yeah.
I'll start with you. Talk about what you and Stuart have kind of hooked up with.
Sure. Actually, oddly enough, can you see it?
I was just going to say, move your head
Can you
over
see
a
that?
little bit.
Okay. Yep, I definitely do.
All right. That's I just got the movie poster back from the printer. That's going to our screening next week. But the movie's called Don't Say It. It is based on real events of my life. I would not say it's my story, but it's definitely it's inspired by true events. It's a story that's been kicking around in my head for a while. The whole time I kind of had the restaurant. This story was kicking around in my head. And like any independent filmmaker will tell you, there's your plan, and then there's what you're going to have to wind up doing to get your movie made. And usually those are two different things. So I started out with this journey. First of all, I never fancied myself a screenwriter. So first of all, I tried to get I have a lot of talented people in my life, Stuart being one of them. So first thing I did was try to get somebody to write this thing for me. And they're like, dude, we have our own stuff. Go write your own script. And then, and COVID happened, and that's exactly what I did. I was sequestered like the rest of the world. And I would have never written the script had I not been sequestered. So wrote about 10 drafts of a script. These people that turned me down flat were kind enough to give me notes along the way, but they were definitely not going to do my homework for me. So wrote the script. COVID had subsided a bit. We did a reading. It was laugh out loud funny. It had a ton of heart. But even me, I'd like to think I'm an okay producer, so I could tell a good script from a bad script, at least for my own personal taste. And even though people were laughing hysterically and crying in the right spots, I knew the script had to get better and deserved to be better. So then the friends that turned me down flat, but now that the hard, not the hard stuff was done, but the bulk of it was done, they graciously came on board for like no money because nobody had any money, and wrote with me. So there's two other amazing writers on this. One of them is actually in the movie, PJ Marino, and my dear friend Jessica Abrams, award-winning writer, that came on and made a good script great with me together, collaborative. And then I started out with a certain budget in mind, and I knew I wanted to play this lead. This was always going to be my Rocky, my Goodwill Hunting, my Swingers, Bronx Tale, whatever analogy you wanted to use. That I was playing this guy, Pat Leone. I, and I actually had a producer say, "I get you 150,000 for this script. The script's great, but you got to bow out." And I'm like, "No, I'm playing." So even the money I thought I could raise, which I started low, nobody wanted to give me to play this part. and So we got it down to a budget that I don't want to completely disclose, but it was much lower than we anticipated. But because of my experience back in the 90s doing that $30,000 movie with Nine Ball, all those commercials, I knew a lot of people. I never really asked for a lot from a lot of those people. So we went to the well, man. We went to the well, and I got a lot of beautiful people to give us a lot of favors. Uh, it was synchronistic that, and we were permitted to work during the strike. We had SAG's blessing. So we shot this thing in 15 days during the strike when people that, even if they wanted to help us, normally couldn't. But a lot of people were home, man. So we got a lot of people to step up that were glad they were home and could get on a set for a few days. So we shot this in 15 days. And it was funny, on two separate occasions, I had hit up Stuart for money. And he did his due diligence and he put me through the ringer and I answered all his questions. And at the end of the day, he for whatever reason he kept backing out on two different occasions, and I still needed a little bit more done. But he said something very smart that I listened to, where he said, "Dude, don't worry about having all the money. Just go shoot what you can."
Yeah.
I said, "Could I really want to do this, man?" Because I basically told people that gave me money I had all the money, so I was kind of lying. But again, there's what you do and what you have to do to get your movie made. So we shot it, we got it in the can, and for a little bit of money, and I needed finishing funds, but I showed Stuart the rough cut, and I think it was it was a beautiful compliment, a little backhanded. He goes, "I never thought in a million years it was going to turn out this good." and he said, "How much do you need?" And I told him what I needed, and he gave me a big chunk of what I needed to finish the film. But I said, while you're at it, I go, I didn't cast this one part. It's something we were going to shoot afterwards. I go, why don't you do this role? And he's like, and I had like me doing the voiceover. I had a picture of a guy, and I was just doing the voice. So he saw the potential of what he could do with this role, and we shot it after the fact, and he just killed it. It's so funny. He's in every scene with the lead actor, the lead actress, and they've never met yet. So, but you never know it. These guys are like just bouncing off of each other, and he's so funny in this movie. And so it's a romantic comedy for old people. Basically, it's edgier than a stereotypical rom com, I think. And these characters just have all of them, not just the leads, have just a lot of heart. And you see these people for who they are, warts and all. And I think a demographic of kind of, I think everyone will kind of dig the movie, I think, but I think especially anybody like 50 years old and north of 50, we're hoping this will resonate with them. Like it's a movie that they're familiar with that really isn't being made anymore. And that's kind of what we're hoping for. But at the end of the day, no matter what happens with it, my goal was just hopefully that anybody that's touched this movie in some way is proud that they did. And I think I've accomplished that. So
And I think
we'll see what happens.
And I think, guys, and I think that whenever you could do a film like that, and a lot of it's based on events in your life or stuff that, is sort of like you, it just makes it that more fun to write it and then put it together because, I mean, basically you're telling your story in a lot of ways. So I think that's got to be, makes it so much fun.
Yeah, this is basically how I wish my real life would have turned out,
Yeah.
but life is life, man, and I got what I was dealt. But it also gives me this movie also gives me hope that my life actually could turn out this way.
Right.
This ending of this movie is not real life, but it has potential to be. So
Yeah. And Stuart, for you, I mean, you're in the movie. I mean, you're in every scene, as Rich mentioned, and you're also the executive producer. So you're doing double duty there. But I mean, for you, somebody who's been acting, nearly 40 years, this had to be, in fact, it probably is 40 years, but this had to be something that was really rewarding for you.
It was. I mean, it was. As Rich said, he sent me the script a couple of years ago. Um, I read it. I liked it. I thought it was, over the years, you get used to reading a lot of scripts, and certainly you see a lot of projects that are done, and you wonder how they got done. They're not necessarily your taste. This was written. It had a lot of humor. It had heart. The characters were very well developed. And I was happy for Rich, but I wasn't quite in a position to help at that time. So, Rich did not mention, and we went through iterations of trying to get financing for this project.
yeah,
He went on, did a campaign to try to get money for the project. And then, like he said, eventually, um, I encouraged him to shoot what he could. Then he would have the material and then probably be able to attract more people to finish it. And so ultimately, um, that's what he did. And what he said is exactly what happened. I watched it. There was this key role that from the very first time I read it, I thought, this is a great bit for a legitimate name. And so his goal was to get an actor with a name to be able to play this role of the newscaster, because in my mind it was pivotal and it was a great bit. That's kind of it's separated from the reality of the movie itself. So when he asked me and said that he had cast it already and they weren't happy with the performance of the actor that was in it, um, justifiably, that um, I was, I was happy to. I wanted to be part of it, and as I've said, I wanted to help push this over the finish line. And so, the finished project, Mike, is very accessible. It's relatable. There is an audience there, and so it was my time to jump on board and help Rich, and also be part of the project on screen as well. So hell yeah! So I'm 100% behind it. Happy to be part of it, and can't wait for other people to see it.
and what I'd like to say and tag on what Stuart said. For people out there that may not know, generally the role of the executive producer is either to find the money or give the money and just get the hell out of the way. And I am so glad that Stewart actually wanted to take more of a working role, almost like a producer esque role, and take an interest in, okay, what's next? We made this great movie, but how we getting it out there? And I'm really glad he kind of voluntarily kind of became part of the team of promoting and wanting to actually sell this movie so the world could see it.
I
So
mean, listen,
I'm very excited to be working with him on that level, because that's not usually the role of an EP, and I'm glad he took it upon himself to actually want to be part of that with me. You know,
when you look at it, Mike, and you think about how difficult it is to get a movie made and done, the fact that Rich has done this and done it in a way where it's bootstrapped, it's it is
It
organic.
doesn't look bootstrap, by the way. Looks like
Not, it,
looks
Yeah.
like we spent millions.
not
Yeah.
at all. It's a good movie. It's a sweet movie that has an audience to it. So for me, this was my involvement in it had to have been more than just being in it, in addition to helping to finance it as well.
Right. So, Rich, we're looking at sometime late spring, right? When it'll
We're looking at when somebody wants to say, yeah, let's take this movie and run with it. So we don't know. We don't know. I mean, we're doing all the legwork. We have a strategy. We're moving forward. Obviously, it's the festivals first. Obviously, you get into a top 10. You kind of get into a top 10, the work starts being done for you. But even that, you have to be prepared for. You get into a top 10, you better have a really good sales agent, and or you better have like a great PR firm or somebody like that, kind of pushing you through that process and getting the right interviews and the right people in front of you, and cause the noise, if you will. But our first one is a top 10. We don't know if we'll get it or not. We're submitted. We're submitted to the Tribeca Film Festival. We'll know in April if we got in. If we get in, that's going to be huge for us. But if we don't, we have backup plans. We have other festivals right after that. We're submitted to Dances with Films. We're submitted to Rain Dance in London. We're submitted to Nantucket, Toronto. Uh, anyway, we have about 10 or 12 that we're submitted to, and there'll be more. And there'll
yeah,
be more. We took a meeting with a young, new, very uh, a new company. They're out there. They're not new, but they're out on their own now. But they were with big companies. Now they're doing their own thing. But Stuart and I took a meeting with a sales agent. See, that wants to rep. That seems like they want to rep the film. We don't know if we're going that way yet, but we're entertaining it. We're entertaining talking to some other people. We have this friends and family screening coming up next week, and yeah, I did invite some industry. There's going to be some industry there. There's going to be a few distributors there that are friends and family. Some casting, actually, the casting director that put Stuart and I in Godzilla is going to be there because she's a personal friend. April Webster. And so we're going to have some industry there, but it's mostly going to be friends and family and people that helped get it to where it is.
But
So
if your audience wants to see a trailer for it, they can go to don'tsayitmovie.com/watch. Don't
right.
say it movie.com/watch. And the trailer is there. And of course, you can always go to, you can follow us on Instagram. My handle is what you're looking at right now, Stoochmac. You can always type in that's my nickname, and then you can look up Rich. You can also look
I'm
up.
Rich Grosso 61. So my handle's Rich Grosso 61. And but if you get to the website, as Stuart said, don't say it movie.com, it'll have our Facebook, our movie Facebook page there, our movie Instagram page there. And besides the trailer, which we love this trailer. Yeah, I think our editor did a great job on this trailer, and but also I encourage your audience to peruse the website because there's a lot of cool actors and people involved in this thing. It's very how would I say it's very diverse cast and crew, but crew like accidentally too. Nothing we need this diverse crew. It's because I guess as people we are inclusive as people, Stuart and I. So like our director is from London, our cinematographer is from Cuba, our colorist is from Australia, our composer is an Emmy Award winning composer who's from Italy, lives in Rome, born and raised in Italy. So the guy usually gets a lot of money to score movies and scored ours for very little because he just loved the film and wanted to be a part of it. So we're very blessed, very lucky, and we encourage your audience to go check out our website and certainly go see the trailer.
Well, guys, this was a lot of fun for me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing this. I'm gonna check out the trailer, and I'm just glad that you both are back in the game again because I know you had to both leave it for a while, and to see that you're both back doing this again because you're very talented, and this just seems like a movie that people need to see, because I mean, again, it takes you away from all the tough things that go on in your life, and it gives you an escape. And I really look forward to it, and I applaud the work you're doing. And thank you for giving me a few minutes
Thanks,
today.
Mike.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
thanks for having us, Mike. Really appreciate it, man.
Me
Our
too, guys. Thank you. That, of course, was Stuart Fratkin and Rich Grosso. I'm Mike Kenichi for In the Spotlight saying goodbye, everyone.